we have the root ni as an ordinary meaning to lead. And from that, we have, for example, regularly formed Nayaka, means a leader, as in the former, long ago, I think, Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Bandaranayaka, which means monkey leader, from the story of the Ramayana, the leader of the monkeys. And it makes a verbal noun, naya. It's all regularly formed from me. Naya just means a leading. And so now upa means up to. Whenever the Buddha is preaching in the forest, and somebody approaches him, say upa sankamitva, stepping towards him, stepping up to him. So the upanaya is where you lead somebody to somebody else. Now it has been interpreted in the way that you said, leads you onwards, doesn't leave you stuck, it leads you onwards out of the fix for him. But also among the Brahmins in Sanskrit, that word upanaya was the initiation of a child, because he was led up to his guru at the age of, it happened around the age of 13, roughly the same kind of age that the Jews had the bar mitzvah, and the Catholics had the confirmation ceremony, which I attended for my granddaughter only a few days ago. So that's the upanaya, and that is a noun. And by regular formation in Sanskrit, it makes an adjective, upanayika, meaning initiatory or relating to the initiation ceremony. Pali doesn't have this O sound, so it simply becomes O in Sanskrit. So upanayiko. The reason I tend to favor that interpretation, though it may be one of these things we're invited to hold both meanings in our minds at the same time, is that very frequently the Buddha would use Brahmanical terms, but give his own Dharma twist to them. He was always saying the true Brahman is not the one who wears the thread and bathes in the sacred waters. The true Brahman is one who hears the Dhamma and follows the Dhamma. So this may be one of those cases where the Buddha is actually using a Brahmanical term and saying the true initiation is the Dhamma, not this mere outward ceremony that the Brahmins use, which would be very like the Buddha to say that kind of thing. So I think we can hold both meanings in our mind at the same time. I'm getting even more cautious as I go along by saying, I like that, I don't like that. So often I think we're being invited to hold two meanings at the same time. Yes, pranitam. So pranitam is in Sanskrit pranitam, brought forth, brought out. And the imagery is the food that you give to your guest.
Sorry, panitam.
Khayam viragam mamatam panitam. That's it.
So you have it translated as the supply.
Yes, because I regret having made it sound so simple. If you were going to do a single word translation, which basically this box on the right is, but if you look down to the bottom of the page, you'll see the word pranita with a double colon space in front of it.
Right. Okay.
That double colon space is the giveaway. That's the clue that is dealt with in the explanatory glossary in greater detail.
Extra notes.
Yeah. So actually, there's quite a lot in that explanatory glossary. And the people who are joining the Pali course, I'm starting in the Zoom online one in September. I'm going to have to impose a little bit more discipline, a much larger number of people, and you're going to have to use the explanatory glossary. But there's also now, you constantly find out more and more from unexpected sources why was this word panita, the best food? Originally, it was what was put in front of the guest. So why has that word been singled out? Meaning the sublime, the best of everything. Well, I discovered accidentally this very afternoon. And
Hot off the press.
It's
Hot off the
off the press. But so, because there was a certain gentleman who kind of dropped me in it by putting me in a position where I had to give a talk quite soon on ancient India and the beliefs and customs of the time. So I started just doing. Francis very kindly put my name forward to give the talk at Tracy's
I'm
class.
sure. We'll get you to
So I started reading, actually Lamotte's early history of Buddhism as well, pretty good background stuff. And the importance of this is something I hadn't known, that if a guest comes to a house, I knew that a guest is always meant to be treated in the literature as you should treat every guest as if you were a deva, as if you were a god. But there's something I picked up this afternoon, that if you leave a guest unfed, the karmic consequences are dreadful, because if you fail to honor your guest by feeding him well, what happens is he leaves all his bad karma with you, but takes all your good karma with him. It was the ancient Hindu belief. So you had to be really, really careful about feeding your guest well. And so that now I've seen what may lie behind why they chose that word. The best of everything.
It's the best mental food.
Of course, it's been given that additional, more spiritual meaning in Buddhism, but so much of it comes from some of the cruder aspects of what you might call popular in Hinduism. I mean, obviously, what you say is correct, but traceable back to this root.
And certainly in Korean culture, physical food, you have to give to the guest, otherwise it's really bad karma.
But not to feed your guests well.
It's kind of culture. So he gets lots of food when we go.
when you go to visit family in Korea.
Like really a lot.
I get treated like a king. It's quite amazing. They just kind of give me food. But our daughter Gia, she's like number one, and then I'm like number two. But I really get treated very well. I have to be really careful. If I say I like something, then they start.
Next day.
Extra helping.
You've got to be quite discreet about it.
If they kind of pay attention to what I eat, and they get more involved.
But yeah, that's for every kind of guest. If anybody comes into your house, you have to feed them very nicely. That's kind of culture.
So, because in Korean, you wouldn't say how are you, but you would say
have you eaten?
have you eaten?
Exactly. I remember in China they used to say the same thing. So, this kayam, the fading away, the cessation of things, the viragam, the getting rid of your raga, of your passion, the amatam, amritam in Sanskrit, the deathless, the panitam. If we can if we're forced into a single word translation, the sublime, which the Sakyamuni, sage of the Sakya, that was his clan name, Buddha's clan name, the sage of the Sakyas, Ajjaga Samahito. Ajjaga, this is not quite the moment to master these aorists, but it's from the root gam, which is an alternative root ga, meaning to go. So adhi means on top of. So adhigachati, literally to get on top of, go on top of, is their way of expressing to understand. We say stand under it or understand. They say go on it. So there's this physical, both ways of expressing understanding are expressed in terms of physical spatial relationships. So jaga, I won't go to the grammar of that, it's a bit complex meaning in a moment. Just to take that meaning which he has understood. Samahito. And samahito is the past participle form of samadhi. It's the root the verb root, the dhatu is dha. In ancient Indo-European it means to put or to do, then it came to be more to put. And when it comes at the end of a compound, it just changes to the. So samadha, verbal noun samadhi, samadha. You can act the samadha is gathering in towards yourself. So you can mind the word for samadhi. So the translation concentration is good enough because concentration means bringing into the center. Also, you can concentrate a liquid by getting rid of water and then concentrating it down to its elements. So samadha, bringing into the center. The past participle of dha, it's irregular. You would have expected it to be. Also, if you have a root of dha, if it were regular, which it's not, what would you expect the past participle to be?
I don't remember.
Data, almost right. Dati would actually be the verbal noun. The past participle ends in da. Danta, gata, sugata, tata, gata. So instead of, you'd expect it to be dhata, but it's not, it's irregular. So just make hitta, it's just a slight irregularity. So hitta means place, placed. Curiously enough, it by extension, I haven't quite worked out why it meant that. It means hitta, it means well placed and therefore beneficial. And also as a noun, just the benefit. The Buddha taught for the sukhaya hitaya, for the happiness and welfare or benefit of the world. So here it's used as a pure past participle. So the last word in that verse. So we have the verbal noun samadhi, the gathering in together. And he is here samahito, that's the past participial form. That means he is gathered in, which means in a state of samadhi. So kayam viragam mamatam bhanitam yadajhaga, which was on which Sakyamuni, the Sakya sage, the sage of the Sakya Kam, understood samahito in a state of samadhi. Natena dhammena samattikinchi, which is, I think, the same as the equivalent line in the previous, almost the same. Natena dhammena samattikinchi. So na kinchi, there is nothing. Or na atti kinchi, not is anything, there is nothing. Samatena dhammena, equal to, similar to meaning here, equal to that dhamma. So there is nothing that is equal to that Dhamma. I would have, if this had been written in ordinary prose, it would have been written something like Natena Tamena Samam Atti Kinchi. Instead of which it's written here as Samati, that is poetic license. One of the little problems with Pali, the poets are constantly doing poetic license, either lengthening syllables or shortening them or dropping out a final M or something to fit the meter. Something that would never be allowed in Sanskrit. But because Pali is, all of this reflects the fact that Pali was just a colloquial spoken language. It didn't follow the strict rules of Sanskrit. It followed rather looser forms, just like colloquial English. And more so in poetry. So in Dambi Dhamme Ratanam Panitam. Here we've got Panitam twice in the same verse. So the Ratanam Panitam is the big sublime jewel. So here's the Buddha. Why do we say that why do we speak of the Buddha as we do? This is the sublime jewel. This is the sublime jewel in the Dhamma. So when we look into the Dhamma, this is the sublime jewel that we find there. And the last half line is just Edena Satchena Subhati Mutu. That's the instrumental that we were looking at a couple of weeks ago. Edena Satchena, by this truth, by virtue of this truth, by means of this truth. Subhati Mutu, may there be well-being. I think I explained some time ago that the Swati, Sanskrit swasti, from which we get, that's where the Thai say swatika or swatika, which is from Sanskrit swasti. And rather some cultural appropriation by the Nazis, because it's the originals of the word swastika in Sanskrit. Meant originally the Brahmin who would come and chant verses of blessing at an important eventless ceremony, or births, name-giving ceremonies, marriages, and the like. But this swastika was the good luck man, and then by extension it came to mean a symbol of good luck, like an amulet or a charm. And many Buddhist temples, as you know, they actually have swastikas in the design, in the architectural design. It was perfectly innocent.
Is it the other way around?
Yeah, that's right. I think you can have them both. Typically, it's a right-handed swastika. You can tell a right-handed because you've got the four arms, and if you imagine streamers coming off the ends of each arm, if you turn it clockwise, the streamers, and it comes out, you've got your cross there. If you imagine like on a pivot there, if you rotate it that way, then the streamers are going to be like that. That's, I think, how you normally find it. Whereas the Nazi swastika was the left-handed one. So in other words, if you rotated it anti-clockwise on a pivot, streamers would be going the way that it's shown there. But I have seen the left-handed one in Indian architecture, but the right-handed one is more common. And just again on the word Dhamma. true polysemic words. Remember, it's from the root dri, meaning to hold firm. It's a pity that when it came into Latin, the d changed to a f sound. So the original meaning is holding or firmness. And our English word in Latin, the word became firmus, meaning firm or solid. And that's what, so in English, when we talk about something being firm, held firm, or on firm ground, that's that same word with the d that morphed into a f in Latin. I think you probably say something like dzierżati for to hold in Polish. It's, the Russian word for to hold is dzierżać, which is directed to cognate with the dri of the dharma. I strongly suspect if you ask Katrine what to hold is in Polish, you should recognize the first few consonants of dharma.
Right.
Probably something like dzierżati, I suspect. So, do we have any comments or queries?
Just on that Dhamma. So, what does that mean? Like in this way, like holding.
That's the underlying meaning. It's very often meant, it very often resurfaces in the meaning that we mostly know. The Buddha Dhamma, who's studying Dhamma, living according to the Dhamma, means the teaching. But the underlying meaning is like a law of nature, like an unchangeable, firm law of nature, that which is solid and known, almost like the natural law. And sometimes you can't quite tell which meaning it has, but when this word was being used all that time ago, the people using that word would necessarily, they were using it in the sense of the teaching, they would always have that underlying sense. It's that which is firm and solid, the law, as in not just a human law, but like a law of nature. And when it's used as the second member of a compound, it means having the nature of something. As it is in our well-known expression, the last word, the last sentence uttered by the Buddha, Vaya Dhamma Sankhara Apamadena Sampadeta. Vaya means falling apart, coming to bits. Vaya Dhamma, having the nature of falling apart. So Sankhara, sanskaras, compounded things are Vaya Dhamma, literally decay natured. They are of the nature to fall apart. We are all Marana Dhamma, of the nature to die.
It's quite interesting because it feels like something firm thing that what I'm going to say is like something very solid. Having I don't know so having the nature of the real what it is. I don't know. It feels more like what actually it is.
I think that's right, yeah, because if you're via Dhamma, your Dhamma is inner solid nature, what it is by the laws of its own nature. So Sankhara, compounder things are via Dhamma. It is their own nature, their own inner moral, inner natural law to fall apart. So yeah, I mean, I'm glad you made that connection there. It's not just they are of the nature to do that. That's how we express it in English, but it's their own inner natural law, the immutable law that they cannot escape, that is what will happen.
So having a relationship with the word dhatu.
That's from Dha.
Right.
This is so Dhamma. So it's the root dre. Means to the underlying meaning of the root is holding, firmness, holding, solidity. As a verb, it just means to hold. The abbot of Hartridge Monastery is Drutindharo, which means a light bearer, light holder. And his junior monks were delighted when I told them that means Lucifer. Drutindharo, light bearer. So that's dre, from which we make a verbal noun with the root coming on, dharma. And it's that rma, but we could just pick that's Sanskrit, and the rma becomes by regular phonetic mutation a double M in Pali. By contrast, you get the root dha. And it's from that you get the word dhatu, which I'm not quite sure how the meaning evolved. I need to give that some more thought. So dhatu means kind of an element, a basic component of which something is formed, a dhatu. In linguistics, it means a root, which is the smallest unit, the irreducible unit of a verb. And it also means a realm. So it's one of these words that kind of branch out, not entirely comprehensively to me. There's always remain these few niggling uncertainties. We can't quite get it, but the older we get, the more we realize we have to be comfortable with uncertainty. Comfortable with uncertainty. But by the way, the seat of firmness and the seat of power, solidity, in Greek is from that same root with a thr root. Dr in Sanskrit becomes a thr in Greek. So the thronos, which of course we have in English as throne, is from that same root. It's the firm seat, the seat of power, the king holds. And amata, I think you all have amata. Yes. In Sanskrit, you know what it is in Sanskrit, don't you?
Sorry?
You know what it is in Sanskrit.
No.
It's the amrita,
Right.
which means the amrita. In Latin, immortalis. It's the undying.
Right.
So literally, would mean the undead with a kind of zombie-like sinister meaning, but it also has the meaning of just the undying, that which is undying, that can translate as the deathless. And it applies to a thing, and the immortals when it comes to beings. From that same root, you can say amrita or also amara, and they both essentially have the same meaning. Amara means undying. You will hear people saying, I screech the siren now, I'm about to deliberately mispronounce the word. You will hear people saying Amaravati. Don't do it. Amaravati. It's quite a common name back in ancient times in India. There are some survivals in modern India. If you have a word like means it the abode of something. So so sukha, happiness, sukhavati, the abode of happiness is the name of one of the heavens. The Amara, immortal, Amaravati is the abode of the immortals. Someone actually once showed that even Sumedhu, Adran Sumedhu was pronouncing Amaravati. I found that very difficult to believe. If it were true, I'd be thinking in a stern but polite way is to say, hang on, don't mislead generations of Buddhists into pronouncing it that way.
English people are unfortunately rather good at mispronouncing foreign words.
So who was?
English people, British people.
I'm afraid that it happens all too much. Even people who ought to know a lot better, like the abbot of the place. Yeah. So before we move on, we can deal with any further comments or queries. Would you like to recite that verse? Please have a go at reciting it.
Not sure whether I can make proper pronunciation.
Shall I go through it once very
Yes,
slowly?
please.
Oh, I should give you one word of caution. I think all of us here will have heard Thais chanting this sutta. We chanting a lot of stuff in Pali, and in many of our chants, we can follow the Thai way of doing it. Of course, if we're chanting in unison, we obviously follow we follow the tradition out of which we've learned that chant. But when I'm teaching this as a language, I do my level best to pronounce it. As far as we can get it in the same way that it would have been pronounced at the place and time that the Buddha lived. I've said before, we've got a pretty good idea of how fairly close idea of how that would have been, because we have the modern chanting in Sanskrit, or particularly in Vedic by Brahmins, which is a very good indication. So when I'm pronouncing it, I do my best, unless I'm deliberately following a Thai style. I do my best to follow the what you might call the Ganges Valley pronunciation. And in my other class, I've got two native Hindi speakers, and when they're reciting things in Pali or Sanskrit, it just comes out so beautifully and naturally. Usha as well, who sometimes joins my Pali class, when she recites it, avoiding the Thai style but using her native Punjabi, it sounds so authentic. And oddly enough, I was delighted because not so long ago, my Pali class was joined by a fellow with a big beard, a Muslim name, Abdul Mateen, and he comes from the land of the Pathans in northern Pakistan. I just wonder whether he has to join the Pali class in secret, because I'm sure his Muslim neighbors would not be very happy if this Pathan Muslim would Abdul Mateen. But he's a very keen student. And because his language, Pashto, is also direct descendant, closely related to Urdu, Hindi, and more distantly Pali, he's got a beautiful pronunciation of Pali. Dear old Abdul Mateen, the Muslim, he keeps his door shut and quite careful to see who's going to come in and study Buddhism and Pali. So yes, I'll read it through once more in my best imitation of a Ganges Valley accent. Kayam viragam amatam panitam yadajjaga satyamuni samatu natena dhammena samatti kinchi idampi dhamme ratanam panitam etena satchena subatti hotu. We've got this M, subdotted M at the end of a word. The Thais will always pronounce as if panitam with a l sound. The Indians would never do that at the end of a word. It's they'd only pronounce as a l if it was followed by a k sound. But if you want to follow the Thai way in doing that, that's fine. The Sri Lankans sometimes do it as well. I wouldn't stop. Okay then.
Yes, that's a question. The V sound, so I had understood that as like a W sound, but you pronounce it kind of halfway.
I did. The Thais and the Burmese pronounce it as a pure w sound, exactly like our English w. It's probably what I call a bilabial. In English, we never as a w. The lips aren't touching, they're rounded, but the lips don't touch. W. When we pronounce v, we have the lower lip against the upper teeth. V. This is, and when we have the b, we have the two lips together, and then the b. This is, the Indians would pronounce as a v, not quite a v, like a v, but without the teeth touching the lip. It's like a v. The lips almost together, but not quite v.
Okay. So it is halfway.
It's halfway. It's a bit like the Spaniards pronounce the v sound, which is not quite, it's in between a b and a v. But the Thais and the Burmese were just pronounced as a pure w, exactly as in English. The Sri Lankans also have the advantage of having a couple of Sri Lankans on the Zoom class, and they pronounce it pretty much like the Hindi speak, that halfway v. But whenever you hear the Thais pronouncing to be a pure w, those words vihara. Yes. Okay, then the Thais would say vihan, is that ara against the han. But by the way, another feature of Thai phonetics, which is quite prominent, is the use of the glottal stop. So an Indian would say namo, tassa, namo. The Thai, by the rules of Thai phonetics, they put a glottal stop, namo. And also sometimes they sura meria manja, sura, not sura, sura meria manja pamalatana. But again, that's purely Thai and is completely alien to the phonetics of the Indian.
I've got another, we're going off on a tangent now, but I've got another
Please do.
question.
We call them rabbit holes in our other class. You get a lot of interesting stuff comes out of our rabbit
Just pronunciation, Amaravati. So people, I've heard people say it more like Amaravati. Is that like a Thai pronunciation?
That is likely to be a Thai because the Thais are less consistent. I don't know much about the phonetics of Thai, but the distinction between long and short vowels is actually quite important, supremely important in Sanskrit, Pali, and the languages of northern India. Whereas in Thai, they tend to get a little bit blurred. In ordinary Thai speech, when they're chanting, of course, they are careful to get it right because to chant with a long vowel or a short vowel, you can get out of step with the other people chanting if you get it wrong.
So this word what, instead of monastery. Is that a Thai word? Is that related to?
I think that's a pure Thai word because it's the Thai equivalent of the vihara.
Okay, so the W.
They don't have a V.
Right.
So the Thais don't have a V. So yeah, W or when I was trying to get them to pronounce sounds with a V, I was getting them to pronounce it like an F.
Which
Quite
they can
close.
say, can't they?
Yeah,
They
yes,
say
they've got
Firangi for a European, for example.
Farang, yeah.
Farang.
Farang. So it's close, Farang,
Mm,
close enough
yeah.
to get that sound rather than, yeah. So I think that might be one of the reasons why it's Wimutti and Wihara.
Exactly so. So
Because
it's
they don't
a
have the
normal
V.
reply to pronounce it in that way. By the way, one case of people getting out of step with the wrong vowel length. And before I moved to Manchester, I asked Eileen whether there was any kind of Pali police who would give us Samatha-wide instruction about the correct pronunciation. Well, in the precepts, Kamesu Micha Chara. And a lot of people were saying Kamesu Micha Chara, which is plain wrong. And those who pronounce it with a short vowel will find that they're one step ahead because they've taken a half syllable length rather than a full length to pronounce the R. Eileen informed me that there was no central Pali police. So anyway, now that I've come into a position where I can be a self-appointed Pali police, I'll take advantage of that. But it is Micha Chara. Sam, do you think you've ever pronounced it Micha Chara?
I think in the past, but for some reason recently, I did pronounce it Cha. With
The wrong, okay, right. The reason we do it is because it's a bit alien to our native phonetics of English. It's a bit unnatural for us to make cha, ra. But it's natural in English phonetics to want to shorten that middle one. The cha, ra sounds more natural to the English speaker, even though it's completely wrong. So think of the yoga chara. Okay, after this digression, let's come round to a recitation from you.
I'll try. By the way, in Korean, there's no B or F or short vowel or long vowel.
Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm getting a bit nervous now.
That's part of it. Just the right degree of nervousness. There's a medical term for this exact right degree of nervousness where you perform best. If you're too relaxed, you perform badly. If you're too nervous, it's not just at that optimum level of nervousness.
If they're still smiling,
We'll try and have you at the optimum level of like you were for the exam, not too relaxed, not too frightened. So
The Goldilocks.
the Goldilocks zone, yeah. And
Getting
also,
more and more.
do you have it's actually becoming more and more interesting for us, the anticipation of it? Do you have any doubled consonants in Korean, like
Yes,
Dhamma?
we have double consonant, like double B or double P,
Okay, right.
something like that,
Right.
which some finds it really difficult to pronounce. Like ba
Mm,
and ba.
yeah.
No, we don't have double.
So particularly between vowels. Like for example, the Pali has there's different meanings of Dhamma. I'm not talking about Dhamma, the term, but Dhamma meaning taming and Dhamma meaning requiring to be tamed. So for example, are there any words in Korean where it makes a different word if you double the vowels?
Yeah.
So Dhamma,
Yeah.
Dhamma are
Yeah.
different words.
Yeah, that would make all different. It's just different letter. Completely.
But it would be pronounced double. Dhamma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So double and single, there'll be two different words having two different
But there
meanings.
there are different consonant So in Korean, in the alphabet, there are many consonants, and some of them are grouped together and have the same symbol, but the symbol itself is doubled.
Oh, okay.
It's still a single consonant. So I think, right. So yeah. So
What's,
then, so you were saying like dam, so
Damma.
then the syllable ends with
yeah.
and then the next syllable begins with a ma as well. So it's dam ma,
Okay,
whereas
right.
dam ma, the next one just begins with an a. I think that does happen in Korean, where the one syllable ends with a consonant and then the next one begins with a consonant. It will be pronounced differently.
Would that happen? I mean, we're talking about within the same word.
I think so.
Yeah, and then in that case, that will have different meaning,
Okay,
because it's
fine.
different words.
Right. Okay, fine. So that explains it. So that's exactly the same then as in Sanskrit and Pali. It's a different sound. You hear it, the native speaker hears it a different sound, and it makes a different word. Exactly the same principle applies to long and short vowels. For example, you have bala, the short first a, bala, which means strength. But also you have bala, with a long a, which means a fool. So bala, bala, and the language is full of stuff. So that distinction you see here in Korea. What I'd like you to do then, at the optimal level of the Goldilocks zone, is to pronounce this with special attention to the long, excuse me, to the long and the short vowels.
Right. I'll try my best.
And it's much easier if you imagine yourself chanting in unison, because you've got to follow the longs and the shorts. If you're chanting in a group.
I don't know whether I can do that. I'll just do what I could.
Do what you can. You're among friends.
Kaya viragam amatang panitang ayat ajaga
Yes.
sakyamani samahito nadena dhammena samati kinchi idampi dhamme ratanam panita.
That was pretty good. That was pretty good. But just remember that the an o at the end of a word is always long. Samahito. And the same applies to the a, dhamme. I shall separately deal in due course with that outrageous statement made by Lily de Silva that Francis pointed out to me that the A and the O are kind of in between length. Actually, that impelled me to do something, to go back to the heavyweight grammarians. I think Lily de Silva, she must have been having a bad day. I mean, nobody could write that.
You have to forgive other Harvard scholars, probably.
We have to, I mean, I forgive
Their
them.
trespasses.
Forgive them their trespasses. We will. Actually, it's done a lot of useful work. We all have bad days. We all have writing things.
There's a few typos I've noticed just in the first like 5 or 6 lessons. I think I've noticed like 5 or 6 typos.
In Lily de Silva, yeah.
Yeah.
This was, there are several typos, but this was more than a typo. It was actually a positive statement.
Don't get him started.
I will repeat Francis' warning, don't get him started. I just want to introduce at this point the concept of morai. What mora is, it's a Latin word. It means, it's demurrer in French and demurrage. It means, originally meant a pause or a delay, but in linguistic terms, it means a unit of time, or a length of time in the phonetics of that language. So, and it's quite easily explained. So the word in Latin is used by linguists is amora, and the plural morae. Now, the word bala, you have short vowel, single consonant, short vowel, bala. That word is two morae. It's as simple as that. Now, bala is three morae. Length of consonants, length of syllables is pretty regular in Sanskrit and Pali. Poetry couldn't function without it. Dhamma this is two more either. We've got a double consonant. Oops. And that's one more other. So two plus one.
So why is dumb 2?
Because it's a consonant cluster. It's known as, you can look at it. So if you have, for example, Dhamma. This is known as an open syllable. It's open because it's followed by a single consonant.
Yeah. Okay.
So Dhamma. Now, if you make it Dhamma, and this isn't a mistake for Dhamma, this is the Dhamma word, Purisa Dhamma Sarati, the human bronco, the charioteer of the human bronco, Purisa Dhamma. So here, if you make the syllable division, this is what's known as a closed syllable. This is an open syllable because it's followed by a single consonant and vowel, Dhamma. This is known as a closed syllable because it finishes with a consonant followed by another consonant. So a closed syllable is always two morae, even if it's a short vowel.
Right.
So Dhamma. And when you're pronouncing, you can hear Dhamma. And when we're chanting, I don't know if any of you have been taught by Rachel Hall.
Yes.
So she does her clapping. So each clap, Dhamma, Dhamma, 3 claps there. Dhamma is 2 claps. Dhamma is three claps. She needed to learn chanting. She's quite a strict teacher. She's very, very good. And sometimes you'll go through an entire metta sutta, so with her clapping, looking carefully at everyone's mouth and listening. But it does work. So one clap is a mora. Purisa Dhamma Sarati. So the one clap is one mora, the 2 claps are two mora. The A and the O, if the A is an open syllable, so dhammena, that's an open syllable. Or satchena, etena satchena. So we've got the A, na. That syllable ends in a vowel. So it's an open syllable. Ena. So dhammena. It's dhammena. That's 5. Total 5 more. 2 plus 2 plus 1. The A is always long if it can be. So dhammena. It's only short if it's followed by a doubled consonant. So that is pronounced short in Pali. It wouldn't be in Sanskrit, but in Pali it's pronounced short because it's followed by a consonant cluster. Or to put it another way, it's in a closed syllable that ends in a consonant. And the next one begins, so metta. So it's pronounced as a short vowel, but the entire syllable is two more, metta.
Sorry, so the whole syllable, so meta as a word is 2 morai or 3?
It's 2 plus 2.
2 plus 2, okay.
So if you just think, if it were, so let's look at this word bala. Bala, they're both as short as they can be, 1 plus 1. 1 mora plus 1 mora. Bala, okay, long vowel, so that a long vowel is always two morai. So bala.
Yeah.
Whenever you see an e, it's always, the syllable is always long. So either the e is pronounced short, but it's got a double consonant after it. Therefore, the entire syllable is heavy. Metta. Metta is 2 plus 2.
If you put quavers underneath those in chanting book, that
Sorry?
quavers, there's a music
Yes.
thing, that would be very helpful.
There are some chanting books that do that, but that's for the ups and downs, isn't it? The high and the low. That's just the style of chanting. That's actually nothing at all to do with your ordinary language. You can pronounce it as prose, without any ups and downs. So the quavers that you see are purely, all the other musical notations for ups and downs, purely for chanting. Yeah, uptone and the downtone.
Quavers in terms of just
Easy to do.
yeah,
For the
just
length.
counting, yeah.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because you never need them. Because it's always obvious just from looking at the word itself. I mean, if you look at all of these words that I've written up here, there's never any doubt about the morai. Now here we've got a double consonant there, so we know now that the preceding vowel, we know now rather that this syllable is two morai, metta, metta. We know that this is 1 plus 1 because we've got a short vowel, single consonant, short vowel, ba, la. So 1 mora plus 1 mora. Here, it couldn't be anything else. Ba, la. 2 morai followed by one mora. That's why it's never necessary to explain how long it is, because there is never a single case in the whole language where it's not obvious just from the way the word is written. That applies to Sanskrit as well. There can be slight complications in Vedic, where the way it's chanted, you could have a syllable of 3 morai, but that is peculiar to Vedic. And much as I'd love to go into it, I won't get started on it now. We don't need to concern ourselves with that.
And the 2 morai isn't twice as long as 1 mora.
It is exactly twice as
Is it?
long. Right. So when Rachel is teaching with her hand claps, there is a good reason. I mean, that is technically accurate.
So met and ba. Met is twice as long as the ba.
It is. I mean, I'm trying to do it like, I'll never quite get it like Rachel, but metta, and bala, bala, balena, by a full instrumental, balena, balena, a total of 5, 2 plus 2 plus 1. So basically, whenever you see a consonant cluster or a doubled consonant, you know that that's a heavy syllable. A heavy syllable equals a syllable of two morai. Incidentally, the Sanskrit poets and grammarians, and in Pali as well, they refer to light syllables and heavy syllables as well in exactly this way. Light is lagu and heavy is daru. Both of which words exist with just a slight bit of change in English. Lagu, light, older Germanic, that historically translates licht or light. But we still have the k in it, as they did in Sanskrit, but it's become silent, the word light. And garu is the word that came into that as gravis, in our English word grave, gravitate is the same word. Ooh, sorry chaps, I've gone. Time flies when you're enjoying yourself. It's 20 past. Should we have a break for tea? Pause for tea.
So, mama, same.
Again, yes, but again, you can chant it if you like, but the real emphasis is on pronouncing it exactly as the Buddha would have pronounced it.
Kayan Buddhakan Amatan Anitan Yad Jaga Sakyami Samahito Na Tena Damnena Samatikin Chi Idam Damne Ratana Nita.
You've got it. Sorry, I'm trying to get on that last bit. You got all of the morai absolutely correct. That was very good.
He's good at music.
The syllables, so, yeah, maybe not. Hopefully I did them okay, but I not.
Yeah, there's some slight bit of jerkiness and not the flow, but I was just looking here particularly because we've been discussing it on heavy syllables and light.
How do you pronounce Sakyamuni?
Sakyamuni. Sakya was the name of his clan. In Sanskrit, Shakya. Pali is never Sakyamuni. Well, one point to note here, the word muni in the ordinary prose, it's with a short e, muni, but it's been lengthened here just by poetic license, just for the sake of the meter. If this were written in flowing prose as part of a sutta, for example, you'd always see it written with a short e. Sakyamuni.
By the way, in Korea, Sakyamuni, which is Sakamuni, is the same as Buddha. So
Yeah, it is. So you said Sakamuni.
yeah, Sakamuni.
I wonder. So that's interesting. So then that is the same Sakya. Is it Sakya?
I think so.
Could you say
yeah.
Sak? Does Korean allow kya? Say Sakya.
Not quite Korean.
Maybe that's why you changed it to Sakya, but it is the same. The sage, the Muni, the sage of the Sakya clan.
Different name.
So that was just one of the names that was given to him. It's the same person.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think the differences in Korean Buddhism, they have to, because it's Mahayana, they talk about many different Buddhas, I mean, so they do have to make the distinction between one Buddha and the other. So
Right, I follow, yeah. So if you're saying Sakyamuni, there are lots of Buddhas, but Sakyamuni is specifically the Buddha. In fact, there are other Gautamas as well. In our, kind of, when we're singing homage to the 28 Buddhas, I think there's a Gautama in there that was not our Gautama, if I remember correctly. But if you say Sakyamuni, that unambiguously identifies as our Buddha. So, Francis, would you care to recite, or even to chant,
Right,
the emphasis on the morai?
Right, okay.
You've chanted this 1,000 times.
I'll sort of do half. Ayam Viragam Amatang Panitam Yad Anjaga Sakyamuni Samahito Nadena Damena Samati Kinchi Idam Pidame Ratanam Panitam.
Yeah, all of the lengths there were perfect. With the, I'm going to give you kind of 9.9 out of 10 because the way that Dame came out, I thought you were slightly shorting it. I thought, was that the pernicious Lily de Silva? Dame, yes.
I say that's a medium length.
No, don't go a medium line. Will wind me up.
Domain. Domain. Okay.
Yeah, so at the end of a word, just it's full length, and the same Samahito. When it can you just say that word, Jim? Samahito.
Samahito.
That's right. I think if you are pronouncing it naturally in the phonetics of your native Korean, would you make that O a little bit shorter? Samahito.
Yeah, usually a vowel will be shorter.
Okay. So when you're pronouncing Sanskrit and Pali, be careful to make that final Samahito.
Samahito.
Yeah, exactly. That was very, very, very good indeed. I got 2 Italians in my online class as well. They kind of Samahito. They pronounce a lot of an O at the end.
Oh, well, but because they emphasize the final syllable.
That's because a final, they can have an O or an O. But it's just that when I'm telling them to emphasize the length of it, it comes an open Italian O, not because it's stressed, but just because of the phonetic of Italian push them that way.
Okay.
One of them you might know, Mariano Marcigaglia. Do you know him at all? Keith knows him well, but that's fine. Mariano Marcigaglia.
No.
Keith Munnings knows him via chaplaincy work.
Right.
A very genial Italian. And finally, round to you. You've been studying this sheet of paper all afternoon. You can recite it by heart, Peter.
No, I can't. Sadly not. Okay. Kayang Viragan Amatang Panitan Yadajaka Sakyamuni Samahito Natena Damena Samati Kinchi Idampi Damme Ratanan Panitan.
Yeah, that was pretty good. It was. But I think you were slightly shy about giving the full doubled emphasis to Samati.
Samati.
Samati. If you're going to err on the side of overemphasizing the doubling, because if you fail to do the doubling at all, it becomes a different word. Samati. Yes. In fact, that's a merger by Santi, but Samati. Ati is the Sanskrit asti, which is the Latin est, and our English word is German ist, and our English word is. Good, excellent. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So, any questions? And then otherwise we'll have a little look at the grammar of the genitive.
Sorry, James, what's this language?
That is indeed Devanagari script.
What is it?
Okay, that script is the script that nowadays, in fact, that script did not exist at the time of the Buddha. It was invented in India approximately 1100 years ago. Oddly enough, there's great uncertainty as to how the script came into existence. But it's the script now that is universally used in northern India to write Sanskrit, specifically Sanskrit. And works in Pali, Pali suttas, published in India will typically use that script as well. The only reason I put it in here, and I've done something unusual. The only reason I put it in was actually at the persuasion of the good Mariano Marcegaglia, the Italian Buddhist chaplain, whose name I've just mentioned, because he was in my Sanskrit class. It was in Sanskrit. All these edited texts I put with the Devanagari script, which is the one normally used for Sanskrit, and the transliteration in Roman characters. So when we were looking at the Pali, he said, well, when you're doing these Pali texts, please give us the Devanagari as well, just so we can get more practice at reading. So I said, okay, very easy to do. But you can ignore that. If you showed that script, for example, to Sudhir or any Thai monk, or Burmese monk, or Sri Lankan monk, unless they happen to study it separately, they would not be able to read a single letter of it. And the thing about Pali is that it's culturally completely unimportant what script you use. It doesn't matter. And I've had people saying to me, well, we aren't really reading Pali here because we're reading it in the Roman script. The answer is, it is really Pali because it's culturally unimportant in ancient India what script you use. For example, back in the 60s, I was down in southern India. I was talking to a Brahmin there, we were talking about Sanskrit or something, and he said, oh, well, let me show you this verse in Sanskrit. And he got a book off his shelf, and I said, but that's Tamil. They have a different script for Tamil. I said, but that's Tamil, not Sanskrit. And he looked at me as if I'd said something really silly, which I later realized I had. Because again, when Sanskrit, if down in Tamil Nadu, they're printing a book in Sanskrit, they'll use the Tamil script.
Yeah.
And because Sanskrit doesn't care what script you use, there's just one criterion. Is it a script that can accurately represent the sounds? The sounds are all important. So this book in Sanskrit, if a northern India had looked at it, you would have understood a single letter.
Is Sanskrit like Pali, that there isn't a script?
There wasn't originally.
And there is now, though, is
Oh yeah, and that's the one that's universally used now for Sanskrit, not universally, but in northern India and mostly elsewhere. It's the Devanagari script that's used, the one in the first
there? But
text.
the Devanagari script is for the Devanagari language as opposed to being
No, that's purely the name of the script. It's
Oh, okay.
primarily used, it was originally used for Sanskrit. Modern Hindi uses that script. Modern Hindi, Marathi, Nepali, Gujarati uses a different form of that script, as do Punjabi and Bengali. But the script was invented around 1100 years ago or so for the purpose of accurately representing the sounds of Sanskrit.
So it's not, Pali hasn't been written down in that same script then, or has it?
Only relatively recently. In fact, Pali was not written down at all until the Pali scriptures were first, the suttas were first committed to writing in Sri Lanka. I forget the name of the ruler of Sri Lanka at the time who had it done. And that was about 400 years or so after the death of the Buddha. Up until that time, it had been an oral tradition. And so when it was first written down in Sri Lanka, it was just written in their local script. So honestly, it doesn't matter what script you use, you're still genuinely using that language, which is culturally the exact opposite of Chinese. In China, the rule was, you were literate and learned if you knew the characters. You could read the characters and correctly write the characters. Very, very complex in Chinese. But it didn't matter how you pronounce them, because people had different pronunciations all over the kingdom. So the cultural criterion for good, correct Chinese was the written form of the language. It's the exact opposite in India, where it didn't matter how you wrote it, provided you pronounced it correctly, you got the sounds right.
Okay, so I have a question. So you said in this verse before, this word Shakyamuni has a longer E in this poetic form.
That's right. If you saw that written in say in a sort of ordinary prose, it would be the short E.
So could this be an error? So if it were chanted for 400 years, that syllable, is there a particular poetic meter within this verse that kind of makes
There
that
is, because if you had Sakyam Muni Samahi, there would be 5 shrinks together. Pali likes to avoid that. That's why they just lengthen the E. In prose, that they wouldn't have done that. They just written it in the normal way.
that kind of subtle lengthening of that vowel has been preserved for 400 years by orally.
That's right, yes. How did they do it? Well, they must have had just phenomenal memories. By acculturation, you can train a memory. That's how it was done. One thing about the writing, for a very long time, there was the sacred Vedas, the Rig Veda, the sacred hymns of the Brahmins. The Brahmins, for a very long time, were very resistant to them being written down at all, for fear that they might fall into the hands of non-Brahmins. And it was meant to be the secret knowledge of the Brahmins.
Once a month at the full moon, I think it is, they have the Patimokkha recitation in Thailand. And the war said it can take about an hour, I think.
Yeah, they figure for all was 227.
So they just checked from memory doing this, and then another monk sat there with it all written down, making sure that they get each syllable right as they're pronouncing.
Oh, that's right. One monk has to recite from memory, but they can stop him if he makes a mistake.
Yeah, so stop them getting to.
Because you must have been through this during your period.
No, I've seen it. Very impressive. Very impressive.
The one monk reciting the entire lot from memory.
That's right, and because it's a sort of unifying act for the Sangha, you are all touching each other.
Wow.
Oh, just to make yourself as well one body.
Yes. So it's very powerful, and it's just like a kind of river. It's both fast, but it just sort of flows out. It has a very kind of cleansing feel to it. It's obviously, it's kind of, the sound of the Pali is clearly meant to kind of cleanse and to kind of wash away the misdeeds.
Goodness me, I mean, one of the disadvantages of sitting at a desk reading it as a text, you don't get the living feel that you have had there among the monks. So, shall we look at a bit of Lily de Silva? Bursting to get to the grammar. Lesson 6 is probably the thinnest lesson in the entire book. Because, as we know, the dative, we discussed this last week, the dative and the genitive have become almost entirely merged in Pali. That in Sanskrit, they're kept as two completely different cases throughout the entire declensional system. So the Narasa genitive is roughly the same as what we call the possessive case. So this ending asa, it's asya in Sanskrit. So taking the word nara, which is the same in Sanskrit and Pali, nara. And the genitive singular in Sanskrit is narasya. Sya. Of a man or of a man. And in Pali, as you would expect, the consonant cluster sya, which is distinctly pronounced in Sanskrit, narasya, becomes narasa in Pali. And this sibilant ending, the s ending, the genitive, is preserved in some Latin words, but it remained in the Germanic line right up to modern English. So where we have our apostrophe S, the man's house, you know, it exactly reflects that, and it is etymologically derived from it. So in English, where we have a possessive form with an apostrophe S, that always comes before the noun that it qualifies. Always comes before. So we might talk about, you know, Francis's telephone at the end there. You could say the telephone of Francis, or Francis's telephone. That word order is fixed. The apostrophe S form is, as in Sanskrit and Pali, it tends to come first. So the monks vihara, for example, bhikkhunaam viharo, of the monks, the vihara, exactly following the monks S apostrophe vihara. So that same word order is used, not absolutely rigidly, but that's the normal word order. Can be departed from for either for effect or in poetry, but that's the standard normal order. And the genitive plural is anam in Sanskrit and anam in Pali, and I'll explain why there's that difference. So narasya, plural naranam. Pali never in any circumstances whatsoever allows a long vowel with a m. So naranam is impossible in Pali, always naranam. So that's why we have in Pali naranam. So this is always short with that final M there. Very occasionally, and it's a slightly esoteric thing, but it's why Lily de Silva hasn't mentioned it in this lesson, is that sometimes in poetry, the final is dropped. You get narana as a genitive plural. Sabba papassa akaranam kusalassa upasampada sachitta pariyudapanam some buddhana sasanam. The sasana, that's that famous verse from the Dhammapada. So sasanam means teaching. In prose, you get buddhanam sasanam, buddhassa sasanam, the teaching of the Buddha, singular, buddhanam sasanam, of the Buddhas in the plural. But in poetry, in this particular line, you see it occasionally. There are a few occasions in our chanting book as well. Buddhana sasanam. That's by poetic license. Again, they do it quite a lot. Poetic license. You know, So that makes a long syllable short, because the would be along with two more, right? But there was too many, one more or too many for the poet there, with han, sa, sanam. But you'll spot it quite easily when you see it.
So is there any reason you've not put the dot under the M? Is that?
You're putting me on the spot there, Francis, and you're entitled to, and I will rise to the occasion. But it's under this slightly Sanskritic influence that I'm acting when I do this. When you're writing Sanskrit and you have a word ending in a m, immediately followed by another word beginning in a consonant, any consonant.
Yeah.
It's written as a subdotted M in Sanskrit. It was written slightly differently, or written with a dot above in the Devanagari script, but the principle is the same. When you get a word standing on its own, ending in a m, in Sanskrit we just write it as a full consonantal m without a dot. In Pali, you often see it done by that. It's kind of optional.
Right. Okay.
It's kind of optional. And if I'm given that option, which I perceive myself as having, people like Rachel would disagree with me. Okay, I mean, I will bow to Rachel when it comes to chanting, but I stand up and fight a bit when it comes to grammar and spelling. Rachel would say, in fact, I once pronounced, doing a chanting weekend with her administrator or something. I said, Sasanam. Said, this isn't Sanskrit, James, it's Pali, Sasanam. You know. So it's just a matter of pronunciation as well. I thought on that occasion it would be wise to keep my stupid mouth shut. Okay, look, because she was teaching us in the Thai way. Now, if you were then pronouncing it in the Thai way, Sasanam, then you'd feel inclined to do a subdotted M. This is a fair bit of argument still about what's the correct way to do it. And I think the answer is there's no absolutely correct way. Remember, it wasn't even written down at all for 400 years after the Buddha's death. How they wrote it in Sri Lanka at that time, whether as a final M, whether they wrote as a full M in their script, or as some like symbol representing what we call the subdotted M, we don't actually know. It's pretty much a matter of preference.
So can you have an M without a dot at the end of a word? Or is, if you have an M at the end of a word, is it always, in fact, even whether the dot's there or not, going to be there?
And so I'm not sure if I fully.
So can you have so you've written it without the dot?
Yes.
But it's pronounced is that right?
If you're a Thai,
okay,
and if you heard Sudhira pronouncing that, you would call it Panitang and Anang.
I see. Okay,
The Northern Indians would have pronounced it at the end of a word just as an ordinary M.
I see. Okay, okay.
So I'm veering towards what I've got good reason to argue is the way it was done at the time of the Buddha.
Okay, right. Okay, so in fact, pronunciation either's all right, as it were.
If which is all right, just
in terms of the pronunciation, either is all right.
It is, yeah. My own personal preference, something I don't think I could force on anyone, is I try to follow what the evidence points to as being the closest we can get to the pronunciation at the time of the Buddha. As for how it was spelled at the time of the Buddha, irrelevant question, because it wasn't written at all. I mean, no script was used then at all. So how it was pronounced, I'm pretty sure, that final M, there was pronounced as a full M, as it is in Sanskrit. We know that because it's still so pronounced by the Brahmins now. So there's, I think there's more variation in this particular sound, the final M, than in any other.
So that in the Mangala Sutta, we have a tam Mangala Muta Mang.
Etam Mangalam Uttamam. Etam and the M, it's written without a dot. Have you noticed?
The first N.
Etam, for etam, it's written with a
Yeah.
dot because it's followed by a consonant, the next M.
Right.
Now, if you look at Mangalam Uttamam,
Yeah.
you'll see there's no dot there because it glides straight into the next consonant.
Well, you see,
Etam Mangalam Uttamam. Okay, there is no, it is not subdotted because it's immediately followed by a vowel.
okay.
I think when Paul pronounces that Mangalam Uttama.
Yeah.
So
It
that's an
runs
M, that
into
was
the,
a
yeah.
So,
But you occasionally,
so why is this without a dot? This one, Etam.
okay.
Sorry, is this a bit of a?
That is because that is because it is followed by an M
Right.
and pronounced distinctly as a double M. Etammangalam.
Okay, right.
I would have written that with a dot.
Oh, right, okay,
Yeah.
right, okay.
Again, that's just a little bit of latitude in the way.
But you pronounce it Etam Mangala.
You pronounce it as Etammangalam simply because basically the final M
Yeah,
takes on the tone and form of the next consonant.
okay, yeah.
And so that's why the following consonant is an M, so it's pronounced as an M.
Yeah.
And if the following consonant is a P or a B, it's pronounced as an M. If the following consonant is a K or a G, it's pronounced as an
Okay, right.
So it basically
Right, yes.
takes on the tone of the following.
Okay,
So for example, we say S-I-N, sin, just sin, ordinary N. But if you put a K on in, sink, it automatically becomes an L sound. Even without our think, we write it with the same letter,
yeah,
but sink.
yeah,
We do it automatically, part of our native English phonetics. Exactly the same phenomenon occurs in Pali. The final M followed by K is pronounced as a L.
yeah.
I don't think it's the right moment to go into very depth. But the basic, the most important thing to remember is it doesn't terribly matter how it was actually pronounced back in the time of the Buddha. We can reconstruct from the way the Vedas are pronounced now. People pronounce it in different ways over the modern Buddhist world, and just follow whatever style you prefer. So I think the way I do it is kind of been drawn back to how I perceive it to have been at the time of the Buddha.
I was thinking that Francis was asking about the subdotted N as opposed to the M.
Sorry, did I make a mistake? Did I mishear you?
Maybe not, but I did. So I thought that he was asking about why
There's a dot under the map here.
under the Sanskrit, but not under the Pali.
Is that what you were also?
No. I was asking about the M. You were quite right.
Okay, right.
May I ask about the?
You may. It is the word sandhi, don't you?
Oh,
Yeah, sandhi. Cognate with the Greek synthesis, meaning putting together. It is a rule of internal sandhi, sandhi within a word in Sanskrit, that where you get an N, which otherwise would be an ordinary N, following a R, it automatically flips to a subdotted M sound, Narayanam in Sanskrit. It's just a quaint rule of Sanskrit grammar, and it's sometimes followed in Pali and sometimes not. So that is a R either immediately before the N with a vowel intervening or with certain other consonants intervening. For example, Nirvana in Sanskrit is actually correctly written, subdotted N, under the influence of that preceding R. But it may be a little bit too late in the evening to burden you with this, this rule of Sanskrit for phonetics now. And that rule sometimes is observed in Pali and sometimes not. In fact, there are several words where you can optionally write it either way. That's nirvana, becomes nibbana in Pali. But there's hours and hours of glorious fun to be had studying the rules of Sandhi in Sanskrit. One problem between Sanskrit and Pali is Sanskrit has more complex rules, but they kind of always follow, almost always follow. There's much more regularity, and more rules to learn. Pali is a little bit more fluid in its rules. So although there are less rules to learn, you don't have the same, it's always that, it's not always that, it can be that, or it can be that. It's one of the problems with Pali, which just reflects the fact that it's a colloquial language, not subject to the same like schoolmastery rigidity of the way Sanskrit developed. But in practice, it shouldn't cause you too much difficulty. That's one of the reasons, actually, I often refer, when explaining a Pali word, I often refer it back to the Sanskrit. If you go back to Sanskrit, you've got this regularity of the formation of the words. Things that look weird and irregular in Pali can actually become fully understandable if you trace it back to their Sanskrit origin. Good. I hope Jian has enjoyed her. I don't know if you would describe her hours of freedom from supervision.
Has she sent any texts?
Yeah, she was answering.
Still alive.
It says, so
We've been checking every 15 minutes.
how's the homework being done?
She said she didn't actually. Probably that was only 10 minutes.
Would have been too much to ask for to see the before and the after. You don't trust, do you?
She's very good actually, because have you ever checked? I normally ask.
No, I never checked.
I asked her, he didn't homework, and she's the one that regulates that. So she's quite good.
Well, school didn't
So
tell
far.
us anything yet, so.
Right. She's the one that kind of checked on the
So is she good?
Cease the recording now.
She's very organized.